In the heart of Rome, where the stones of the Senate still held the echo of Augustus and the legions set the pulse of the empire, a shadow was growing silently. Absolute power, that force capable of building empires or destroying them from within, was about to unleash a tragedy that would break the most sacred bond, blood. Caligula, the young emperor welcomed by all as a beacon of hope, would soon reveal a side so dark that even the harshest chroniclers could not describe it without shuddering. This is not just the story of a tyrant, it is the tale of how imperial madness turned a brother into an executioner, and a family into a stage of humiliation and terror. If you've ever doubted how far human cruelty can go when it knows no limits, stay tuned, because what you are about to hear will surpass any warning. And before continuing, subscribe and turn on notifications, because here you will uncover the darkest secrets of history that few dare to tell. Rome had been breathing the poisoned air of suspicion for far too long. The old Emperor Tiberius had turned the empire into a place where every glance could be a denunciation and every banquet could end in a death sentence. So, when that charismatic young man, known to all as Caligula, took the reins of power, the city erupted in jubilation. The people adored him for being the son of the renowned Germanicus, the general who had embodied Roman glory. For the legions, he was a legitimate heir; for the senators, a relief; for the citizens, the promise of better days. And for a brief moment, that promise seemed to come true. Caligula released political prisoners, staged grand spectacles, and distributed rewards to those who had supported him. Rome smiled again, believing that the shadow of fear was behind them. But that calm was only the prelude to a storm. A sudden illness left him teetering between life and death. It is said that for weeks his body wasted away and his mind wandered through delirium, while doctors, priests, and augurs pleaded with the gods for his recovery. Finally, he survived. But he did not return the same. The senators noticed the change immediately. His gaze shone with an unsettling fire, his smile looked more like a grimace than a human gesture. The people who had celebrated his rise soon began whispering in the shadows, because the young man who had arrived as a savior was beginning to transform into something very different. At first, they were simple whims, small gestures that could be mistaken for the eccentricities of a young emperor. But soon, what seemed like extravagance revealed its true nature, the madness of unchecked power. Caligula no longer settled for being called prince or Caesar. He demanded to be worshipped as a living god. He ordered a makeshift bridge to be built over the Forum so he could walk above mortals, as if the common ground were no longer worthy of his steps. Imperial banquets turned into spectacles of humiliation. Elderly senators were forced to run alongside his chariot under the blazing sun while he laughed from above. What had once been ceremonial dinners became stages for carefully orchestrated cruelty. The city that had believed it was receiving a savior began to witness the rise of a tyrant who delighted not only in power but in the pain he could inflict with it. And the most disturbing was yet to come. Because if all of Rome trembled at his delusions, within the walls of the imperial palace his own sisters and brothers would discover that blood was no limit to his obsession. For Rome, the imperial family was a mirror of greatness. But for Caligula, it was the board for his most twisted obsessions. His sisters, Drusilla, Livilla, and Agrippina, ceased to be figures of respect and became objects of forbidden desire. With Drusilla, he maintained a closeness that scandalized even a court accustomed to excess. He presented her as his wife in public ceremonies, and when she died under mysterious circumstances, he ordered official mourning across the empire and elevated her to the rank of a goddess. But the most dangerous threat to him did not come from his sisters, but from his own brother, Drusus Caesar. A young man of legendary beauty, strong, elegant, everything Caligula was no longer. In Drusus, he saw an unbearable mirror, a reminder of what he had lost and what could take away his throne. What should have been a bond of blood turned into a relationship of sickly jealousy, obsession, and punishment. And it was then, within the palace walls, that Caligula proved there was no human bond capable of containing his madness. What began as silent jealousy soon became a spectacle of domination. At banquets, Caligula transformed the imperial table into a theater of cruelty. There, where alliances were once forged and pacts sealed, the most calculated humiliations were now performed. Drusus, the brother born for military glory, was turned into an object of mockery. The emperor forced him to appear in increasingly ornate clothing, surrounded by cosmetics and outfits that erased his identity. Before the eyes of senators and courtiers, that promising young man was gradually transformed into a distorted reflection of himself. No one dared intervene. Fear outweighed compassion. Everyone knew that a single wrong gesture could cost them their lives. And so, the entire court became a silent accomplice to a torment unfolding under the lamps of the banquets. Every laugh from Caligula was a reminder, there were no limits, not in politics, not in intimacy, not even in the bonds of blood. Everything could be corrupted by the whim of absolute power. Chroniclers of the time, such as Suetonius and Cassius Dio, left accounts that even today seem more like dark legends than historical facts. Yet, the consistency of their reports cannot be entirely dismissed. It was said that Caligula had turned Drusus's life into a macabre experiment. He surrounded him with Greek doctors and philosophers, forcing them to devise ways to transform him, to erase every trace of who he had been. Rumors spoke of ointments, strange substances, and endless sessions aimed at changing his appearance and his voice. The most disturbing aspect was not the details themselves, but the obsession they revealed, the idea that, as emperor and considered a god, Caligula could mold a human being to his will, even his own brother. For first-century Rome, these accounts were almost impossible to believe. Yet at the same time, no one could deny that the emperor's madness had already crossed every known boundary. Between rumor and reality, one truth was clear: absolute power, when mixed with madness, can produce horrors beyond human comprehension. Caligula's cruelty did not settle for public humiliation or physical subjugation. His ambition ran deeper, to erase his brother's identity and rewrite it according to his own will. Drusus was no longer called by his name. His youthful accomplishments, military lineage, and virtues, all were silenced. In their place, the emperor assigned him feminine epithets, imposing a fictional role that erased any memory of what he had once been. Chroniclers describe a progressive deterioration. The once athletic and promising young man transformed into a fragile, almost unrecognizable figure, trapped in a body and a life that were not his own. But the most devastating aspect was not what could be seen from the outside, it was what was extinguished within: his dignity, his hope, his very possibility of being. In the palace corridors, no trace remained of the soldier in training or the noble heir. Only a distorted reflection, a shadow fabricated by the whims of a tyrant playing at being a god. Around Caligula, the entire court became a theater of silence. Senators, generals, and courtiers attended banquets and spectacles without daring to look away. Everyone knew what was happening to Drusus, but no one spoke aloud. The slightest sign of compassion could be interpreted as treason, a gesture of disapproval, as conspiracy. In the empire of fear, silence was survival. Thus was born a kind of collective amnesia. What Drusus had been, his military training, his prestige, his lineage, was erased not only by the emperor but also by those around him who pretended to accept the imposed fiction. This forced complicity reveals one of the darkest aspects of absolute power: it not only destroys the direct victim but corrupts an entire society, forcing honorable men to become passive spectators of cruelty. All of Rome, or at least its elite, became silent accomplices to a tragedy unfolding in plain sight, yet which no one dared name. One day, simply, Drusus ceased to exist in official history. Imperial records no longer mentioned his name. No document spoke of him, as if the earth had swallowed him. Rome, accustomed to intrigue and silent assassinations, understood the message: this young heir had been erased not only from the court but from collective memory. Some said he had died slowly, a victim of the treatments and imposed degradation. Others claimed he was executed in secret when Caligula grew tired of his own experiment. And there were even those who whispered that he was poisoned at one of those grotesque banquets where the emperor celebrated impossible delusions. There was never an official version. Only silence. And perhaps that is the most disturbing aspect, that in the heart of the most powerful empire in the world, the disappearance of a noble required no explanation, fear alone ensured that no one asked. The spiral of excesses could not last forever. The senators hated him, the patricians feared him, and even the Praetorian Guard, those who had sworn to protect him, began to look upon him with resentment. Every public humiliation, every crime disguised as a whim, eroded the loyalty of those around him. Finally, the conspiracy arrived. In a narrow hallway of the palace, surrounded by the very men who had once cheered for him, Caligula was stabbed to death. The emperor who had proclaimed himself a god ended as just another mortal, felled by the fury of his own soldiers. But his death did not erase the scars. Rome breathed a sigh of relief, yes, but the shadows of his reign continued to weigh for generations. The abuses committed within his own family became a sinister reminder of what happens when power is freed from all limits. Caligula's fall marked the end of a man, but it also proved that even the greatest empires can stumble when ruled by madness. The story of Drusus Caesar is not merely a dark chapter in Caligula's reign. It is a mirror of what happens when absolute power knows no bounds. Rome witnessed it firsthand: a brother turned into an object of humiliation, an entire court silenced, and an identity erased by the will of a single man. Yet beyond the anecdote, this tragedy raises questions that remain disturbingly relevant. How far can a ruler go when there is no one to stop him? How fragile is human dignity in a system that rewards obedience and punishes compassion? Power, when concentrated in the hands of one, not only transforms the tyrant, it also deforms those around him, turning witnesses into accomplices and families into instruments of control. The lesson is clear: freedom and justice do not sustain themselves. They require constant vigilance, clear boundaries, and societies willing to defend human dignity even in the face of fear. The fate of Drusus Caesar remains shrouded in mystery, but his tragedy survived as an eternal warning. It reminds us that when absolute power is imposed over humanity, even the bonds of blood can be corrupted. Rome no longer exists, but the lessons of its history remain alive. Tyranny does not belong only to the past, it always lurks where vigilance disappears, where indifference allows fear to rule. And the question that remains is unsettling: are we building societies where tragedies like Drusus's are impossible, or are we allowing silence and complicity to reopen the door to tyranny? If this story moved you, leave your thoughts in the comments and share this video so more people can reflect on the limits of power. Don't forget to subscribe, because here we continue to reveal the darkest secrets of history that still echo in our present.